When I was considering a move to Asia to pursue my MBA, I reached out to my professor who wrote a recommendation from my previous university, Carnegie Mellon University. Since my professor was a Chinese national consulting on international energy policy, I figured he would have good advice on the importance of working experience abroad. What he said completely contradicted my expectations. If you want to grow in your career, you do not need to go abroad at all. In fact, one of my colleagues who works for the energy department lives in the suburbs of the Midwest. He lived there for 30 years and has now advanced to high levels in government. It's not clear to me why you would need to go to China. It could actually set your career back in a lot of ways. I was astounded. Here I have a professor from China whose career hinges on international policy telling me that I should not go to Asia. I was expecting my professor to tell me about the rise of China. Perhaps he would tell me how the international relationship between China and the US would define the 21st century. Instead, I received the message, live a routine life and settle in the suburbs. It took me a few years to digest my professor's guidance, but eventually, I did find some truth in his words. There was an entirely different side of the story to his view, one that I can only ascertain after taking several counterintuitive risks. Why should we spend thousands of dollars to experience a different part of the world for a short time only to return back to our local time zone? These are the questions I pondered for years. While my dreams of the expatriate life didn't pan out as I had envisioned them, they weren't entirely wrong either. To understand the value of travel, I had to do an exercise in thinking between. In astrology, the zodiac sign of Sagittarius is the de facto domain of long-range journeys. As a Sagittarius myself, I know quite a bit about this sign. The symbolism of Sagittarius is represented as a half man, half horse with a bow and arrow, conceivably aiming his sights at the distant stars. Sagittarius is also associated with learning, religions, foreign cultures, beliefs, and long-term goals. All of these qualities are related to the fact that they serve as the foundation for societal development. For example, if today we say that we live in the scientific age, it could be said that contemporary society operates on the belief and faith in science. Learning, which takes place at universities, creates the basis for what is considered to be true. In the previous video, Is the US in a Soft Civil War?, we analyze how the division of beliefs can drive decay in society. We could even say that sufficiently zealous beliefs can be considered as types of religions. Those beliefs that serve as the foundation for society determine the direction, or rather the long-term aim of a group of people. In the days of the Catholic Church, the arrangement of society was highly dependent on religion. Where there are different cultures, there are different beliefs. As a sample, we can look at the working culture of Japan versus the United States. There is no physical law that governs how long someone should work at a company to be effective. In Japan, based on the beliefs in hierarchy and loyalty, an employee enters a company and stays there potentially their entire life. In the US, based on the beliefs of capitalism and markets, we see people switching jobs every 2 years to maximize their salary. In China, based on the beliefs of cleanliness and respect, it would be considered an insult to enter someone's home while wearing shoes. In the US, relatively not much thought is given to whether someone is wearing shoes in the home. More thought is likely to be given to what brand of footwear that person is wearing. None of these customs have their roots in physical limitations, but rather in beliefs that focus on emphasizing certain areas of truth over others. Yes, one could maximize their income by acquiring a 15% raise in salary with each job switch, but it does not mean that loyalty to a company is an ineffective way for capitalism to function. When it comes to the issue of wearing shoes inside the house, National Geographic tells us, scientists have plenty of evidence to support the idea that shoes bring undesirable filth indoors, but the immediate dangers of that dirt to human health remain murky. In the video, Action Reveals the Truth, we talked about how experts often use high-level models to make recommendations when reality itself is far more granular. Culture delivers a similar function. Since there is no physically correct way to organize society, culture is a compass for the ways one should behave. We look to culture for instructions on proper decorum. Each one of us carries around the biases of our cultures whether or not we are cognizant. When someone visits a different country, they are performing a diagnostic test on their own cultural proclivities. Every time we encounter something different abroad than what we are used to, we notice to be related to the programming of culture. By traveling, we get a double dose of learning. First, we learn about our own conditioning, and second, we learn other possible ways of doing things we did not know were possible. When I lived in New York City, it was common for people to date multiple others or even be involved in open or polygamous relationships. I thought that this was normal and the way that dating is supposed to be. In Hong Kong and China, even during the early dating phase, most people expect to date only one person at a time. When I was living in the US, people would tell me that it was strange for me to spend so much time studying and reading. When I was in school in Asia, I was seen as peculiar for not staying up the whole night before an exam studying. Living in New York City, I always assumed that the subway was a dirty and dangerous place where the trains run sporadically and are always diverted by construction. When I saw the subways in Korea, China, and Japan, I didn't know it was possible to have such clean and efficient trains. In Hong Kong, there is a public ad campaign advertising the dangers of marijuana. Meanwhile, when I visited Vancouver, Canada, I saw weed lounges where people smoke in public. Drinking alcohol with your coworkers in the US is usually an optional activity, whereas in countries like Korea and Japan, this is a professional requirement. Learning is one of the core attributes of Sagittarius. All of this exposure to new information while traveling facilitates learning. A lack of learning usually results in a feeling of boredom. The desire to cure boredom through travel may in some ways actually be a disguised desire to learn. In the comedic SNL skit Romano Tours, Adam Sandler says,
"If you're sad now, you might still feel sad there, okay? You understand? That makes sense? If you are sad where you are, and then you get on a plane to Italy, to you in Italy will be the same sad you from before, just in a new place. Does that make sense?"
This is perhaps a skit I should have paid more attention to before locating to the other side of the planet. In the US, I was often perceived as an outcast, someone who didn't quite fit in. In spiritual communities, I was seen as too scientific. Then in scientific communities, I was seen as too spiritual. In all circles, I was seen as someone who was too focused on Asia. When I finally came to Asia, the vast majority of my peers were Asian and then saw me as different for being American. It proved that no matter where I go, I am someone who operates on the edges. In the video, Is Your Destiny a Math Equation? We talked about how those personality qualities that one embodies recreates the same situations wherever they go. Before coming to Asia, I often fantasized about reinventing myself to be a completely different person in a faraway country. The word fantasy here would be appropriate. When I was in school, I soon found that I recreated the same social situation of being a pariah. I tend to be a stubbornly independent thinker. Even though I had a blank slate social situation, I once again created the perception that I was overly disagreeable. However, one thing that happened differently in Hong Kong was that I had the chance to work out both the positive and the negative sides of those personality qualities. While at first I was seen as someone difficult to work with, later on I was sought out for my innovative project ideas that brought something highly valued in Asian society an A+. As Adam Sandler says, traveling does not mean we get to entirely reinvent who we are. Yet one advantage of traveling is that we get the chance to create fresh social situations where we can work out the kinks of our personalities. Whereas if we stay where we are, it is likely that we'll get locked in by the perceptions our peers have already made for us. The sign of Sagittarius is also associated with luck. Luck is the glue that connects circumstance with nonlinear growth. If luck has a scientific description, perhaps it could be when circumstance matches opportunity. When I decided to go abroad, I did so at professional expense. While my manager agreed to write my recommendation letter and let me continue to work remotely, he initially tried to get me to stay in New York. In the back of my mind, I knew that putting myself at a distance from the rest of the team could make me an easy pick for a layoff. Yet somehow, as if by magic, at the same time I went overseas, Hong Kong announced itself as a future crypto hub. Instead of living away from the States becoming a disadvantage to my value offering, it soon became a value addition. As we were going through a fundraising round, several investors requested to meet us at Asian-based conferences. I was sent to several conferences in countries such as Thailand, Singapore, and Taiwan to represent my company. Last week, I received verbal confirmation regarding a professional opportunity unlike anything I've come across before. Since the work is based in Hong Kong, there's no way I would have been exposed to it if I was in the States. When it comes to linear thinking, my professor is entirely correct. The best way for someone to build their career is through consistency and routine in one region. When it comes to non-linear thinking, however, travel is more appropriate. When you are out there in the world, you may find yourself in unique situations that you would have never encountered at home. When I first applied to come to Hong Kong, I did not have it in my mind that living abroad would benefit my career in crypto. Yet by luck, the government of Hong Kong independently decided to become a crypto hub. Just last week, the Consensus Conference had its first ever event outside of the US, and they decided to host it a 15-minute walk from my house in Hong Kong. According to the Consensus website, there were 10,000 attendees and over 350 side events. Compared to staying in one zone familiar region, travel increases the surface area for contact with the outside world. As the surface area for contact increases, the probability of some positive interaction also increases. If we stay where we are likely to be exposed to the same people and opportunities that we were exposed to in the past. In a new region, however, people and experiences we have never made contact with before await us. Travel carries a capability to make drastic changes to some areas of our lives, but not to all. Living in another country did not change my fundamental personality or traits. On a day-to-day basis, my work routine is almost exactly the same as in New York. There are some minor substitutions such as what I eat for lunch or who I hang out with. Yet, there exists some exposure to opportunity and experiences that when combined with luck, have the potential to drastically alter one's life path.